Well, good afternoon, Sacred Heart. This is Father Mike. I'm here in Sacred Heart Church. Grateful for your interest in the book, Love Your Enemies, How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt by Arthur C. Brooks. This is the book. It's about 20 or 22 bucks on Amazon.com, and we're slowly making our way through it. Just to report, on Wednesday morning after Mass this week, we had about 15 people who joined in a discussion of chapters 2 and 3. And likewise on Wednesday evening, we had about 15 or 20 people discussing the chapters 2 and 3 after 6:30 Mass on Thursday evening. Again, you're welcome to join us live time. It was brought to my attention that it's best not to record those sessions live because there might be comments made that are personal or private that don't want to be gotten out there in the World Wide Web. So we decided to do kind of a more normal sort of presentation with it by me presenting our material that we covered. So chapter 2 is the chapter, Can You Afford to Be Nice? Because there's a myth, Brooks would say, in the business world, the world of politics, that if you're really going to get things done and be really strong and successful in the spheres of business and politics, you have to be kind of a mean person and put others down and get your way. He says all the data contradicts that from his social science point of view. He cites any number of surveys and studies that were done on leaders and others to show that, in fact, people that are warm to others, that connect with people, that are willing to collaborate, have a much higher success rate in business and politics than do those who don't. One of the dramatic examples he gave was from the life of Nelson Mandela in chapter 2, Can You Afford to Be Nice? Citing Mandela being in prison for 27 years, sleeping in a very small cell, and yet befriending his captors, the white South African prison guards, and learning about their game of rugby. And then as things progressed in the world and in South Africa, eventually Mandela was freed, and he came to admit that in prison, while he struggled with being there, he ended up liking and even loving the captors that had him there. And as he successfully won election to the presidency of South Africa in 1994, their team in the World Soccer Cup, I think it was the World Soccer Cup, no, it was rugby. Marvelous example of how that sport brought their nation together, though they were underdogs, and the Springboks, their mascot, was a hated symbol by black South Africans, came to be a symbol of unity, turning the whole country around. Mandela did this through his ability to connect with those people who didn't like him, with those people who disagreed with his policies. And Brooks shows that as a positive example of how being nice in the political and business sphere can help you win friends, influence people. He also makes the point that our attitudes towards other people follow our actions toward them, not just attitude then action, but that if we're at odds with somebody, an adversary in a parish setting, a community setting, a family, a business, that if we fake it till we make it, if we act like we're warm-hearted towards them, and we actually try to cooperate with them, be respectful to them, that we'll eventually end up loving them and maybe even persuading them, but that's not the point. The point is to really befriend our enemy. And so his thing is, the first way to get to this point is to fake it till you make it. It's also a well-known maxim in the 12-step recovery groups, that when you're first getting into recovery and it hurts like hell, excuse my language, but it hurts like hell to withdraw from the drug of your choice, in the end, it pays great dividends. But you fake it till you make it with others in the room. So this is really a strategy of allowing our attitudes to follow our loving actions towards other people. And he cites a number of pieces of data that make that good. By the way, this book is chock full of footnotes and data. He almost does it too much, but if you want data, he's got it. The second thing that he maintains is that gratitude is the basis of a warm-hearted attitude towards the world. That if you approach the world in gratitude and make that a regular diet for yourself, throughout a day or at the end of a day or beginning of a day or all through the day, noting those things for which you're grateful, you will have a much happier and a better and more successful life by giving God thanks. Or if you don't believe in God, I presume you do because you're watching this, but even if you don't, people who are grateful have happier lives. He cites the great magician Howard Thurston, and Dale Carnegie interviewing Thurston. And what Thurston's point was, he went out there and he performed before 2 million people in the course of the 20s, 30s, and 40s, earned in today's dollars $23 million, but did it in a way that he proclaimed that he loved his audience on the inside. And he prayed the kind of a prayer, or at least a maxim, over and over again: help me to love my audience. And by connecting with them in a warm-hearted way, he was able to be a good showman and a happy, fulfilled showman. He wasn't just taking a bunch of chumps out for getting their money. In these ways and some others, in chapter 2, Can You Afford to Be Nice?, Brooks makes those kinds of points. In Love Lessons for Leaders is kind of an extension of chapter 2, but his point there is that you got to treat the people that you interact with dignity. If you hold them in contempt, people will resent that. He cites a very dramatic example in the United States in the 2016 election, where both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump could be perceived as shake-it-up kind of guys, even coercive leaders that bullied or were very hard on people that disagreed with them. But in the end, Trump won Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania by 12% of Sanders' crossover voters voting for him in 2016. All this is a reaction against the attitude that Hillary Clinton displayed when she called a lot of Trump's supporters the deplorables, in that famous video that happened to get out. He makes a point that there's a dignity gap in America towards especially middle class and lower middle class white uneducated men. And they resent it, and they're an angry core, certainly of Trump supporters, but some of Bernie Sanders supporters as well. They want to shake things up, and they feel overlooked, and they feel, if not taken for granted, even taken advantage of in our society in America. And that's why he's maintained there's such a wide division between those people who support Trump and those who don't, and why it's such a thin division. He also maintains that core of uneducated, college uneducated white men have much higher mortality rates than any other group in America, higher alcoholism, higher suicide rates, and higher addiction rates in opioids. And so he maintains that while coercive leaders might get things done in the short term, like Trump has some successes that he could say in his first term, in his only term so far, that in the end they end up breeding mediocrity. That they don't really care for people, and people can't bring ideas that might contradict theirs or sharpen theirs, and therefore in the end they're going to fail ultimately. He compares the coercive leader to the authoritative leader, not authoritarian, authoritative. And he would hold up, certainly Mandela is an example of that, the Dalai Lama is another example, Martin Luther King would be another one, where they try to bring together positive strands that many different kinds of people can relate to. A love for America, a real patriotism for our country that wants to become more and more inclusive, allowing many more people to take part of the American dream and the American pie. I showed the video of his famous I Have a Dream speech, King's speech, to exemplify that kind of attitude. Now that was 60 years ago, and God knows that we need another leader to stand up, especially within some of the more minority communities, to help a unifying vision. But Brooks would maintain that even at the level of high political leadership, the ones who really succeed include Abraham Lincoln in this lump as well, both his first inaugural address and the second one. The ones who can bring the unifying vision succeed in the long run and help more people than not. Our challenge, he says in the end of this book, I'm on page 85, if you have the book and following it, our challenge going forward is to follow the visionary examples of Dr. King and our founding fathers who disagreed with each other vehemently. Jefferson and Hamilton did not like each other, but they brought forth a nation out of those competing viewpoints that sustained us for a good 250 years now, nearly. So not the model of coercive leadership that has recently come to the fore, but rather courageous leaders who have a willingness to rethink leadership and to respectfully disagree with one another and sharpen their own ideas. And what Brooks will eventually come to call, and his call to our attention throughout this book really is competition of ideas, and not dissing on each other, not holding each other in contempt, but really competing on the level of ideas that the best ones might emerge to bring our nation together and help make us prosperous and really truly great. Next week we'll be covering chapters 4 and 5. Chapters 4, probably the most important one in some ways for Catholics, is How Can I Love My Enemies If They Are Immoral? That's a great chapter. He drills down deeply into the idea of morality and how left and right on the political spectrum disagree about some fundamentals. And then chapter 5, the power and peril of identity, regarding the current craze for identity politics and how it really is divisive ultimately. And I'd like to give you some homework, if I could, as I did the group implicitly last night. Find some leaders who don't feed the outrage industrial complex, as he calls it. Find some leaders that you think are fair in media, in newspapers, informed writers who write pieces about how we can come together and not divide over and over again. James last night mentioned the Candace Owens. I want to look her up yet still. Another one that I mentioned myself is the black Republican senator from South Carolina named Tim Scott. He wrote a wonderful piece in the Wall Street Journal about how for African Americans stuck in poverty, education is as close to magic as it gets. In other words, if they can complete their high school education even, or better yet, a college education, they're going to succeed, but they need the family structure and the wherewithal to get that through. So again, it's a very fascinating read. This is Arthur Brooks again. Love Your Enemies, how decent people can save America from the culture of contempt. Thank you very much. I hope to see you next week or at the live sessions. God bless you.